Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of In the Eyes of Truth. Today, we have our guest, Michael Krupa. For those that don't remember, he is an excellent Polish historian with his mind well set. And instead of, he's not part of the Duda sect, thank God. And
Or the
we,
Tusk sect.
or the Tusk sect, that's right, the two death sects. And we are surviving the post Zelensky meltdown, day two. How are you doing?
Hey there, entrepreneurs. Are you feeling the squeeze from increasing regulations and higher taxes? Maybe you've noticed the growing instability and thought there has to be a better way. Well, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to consider offshoring your wealth now. Imagine a life where your hard-earned money isn't constantly under threat from unpredictable government policies. Sounds pretty good, right? Let me tell you. It's not just a dream, it's a smart strategy. Here at Exit Strategy, we specialize in helping entrepreneurs like you protect and grow their wealth. We navigate the complex world of international finance so you don't have to, from setting up offshore accounts to advising on the best countries with favorable tax laws. We've got you covered. Now, I know what you're thinking. Offshoring sounds risky, maybe even a bit shady, but the truth is many savvy business owners are already doing it. It's not just about dodging taxes, it's about creating a safety net for your future. Imagine diversifying your assets across multiple jurisdictions. When one country faces economic downturns, your wealth remains secure. Think of it as an insurance policy against the uncertainties of life. And let's not forget, having a portion of your wealth offshore can open up opportunities for international investments. You're no longer limited by the economic climate of a single country. You can tap into booming markets around the world, maximizing your returns. But here's the kicker. Time is of the essence. With increasing global scrutiny and tightening regulations, the window for easy offshoring is closing fast. The sooner you act, the better positioned you'll be. So why wait? Protect your wealth, secure your future, and explore new opportunities with Exit Strategy. Don't let the rising dangers in the US economy catch you off guard. Reach out to us today and take the first step towards financial freedom. Because when it comes to your wealth, playing it safe is the riskiest move of all. Thanks for watching, and remember, your future starts with the decisions you make today. Choose wisely, choose Exit Strategy. Catch you in the next video.
I'm doing fine. It's funny because when all of this was taking place in the Oval, I was actually watching a Japanese train video on YouTube, just enjoying it. And all of a sudden, I see my Telegram exploding. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I'm seeing, DGG Geopolitics, Intel Slava, everybody going crazy. My neighbors are even writing me, did you see this? Zelensky's getting his ass kicked. And I checked it out, basically most of the 10-minute video, the crux of the issue, so to say. And wow, it was fantastic. I'm loving all the memes that are coming out after those 48 hours. But I think it's sort of the dawn of a new world in a way, because the last 48 hours have really been amazing. I mean, the way that the European cockroaches of the European Union basically gathered in London are scurrying to find some sort of ceasefire agreement, apparently, that they're going to present to Trump, from what I'm hearing out of the news commentary coming out. You can see the level of desperation. And it was actually manifested, I think, today in the morning when my own Prime Minister Donald Tusk was flying out to London, and he said, words of truth, by the way. He says it's kind of absurd that 500 million Europeans are asking 300 million Americans to defend them from 140 million Russians.
We're mean.
Obviously, yeah, I mean,
And we
we're
say
just
mean
waiting.
things.
We're just waiting for the barbarians to come, for Mordor to move towards us. But no, I think the level of desperation, the level of immaturity, I would even say, the infantile nature of the European elites. You would think, I used to have a fairly negative opinion of what I would call these, globalists light back in the day, like Gerhard Schroeder or Jacques Chirac. But
Oh,
I mean, compared to those guys, the most of the politicians ruling the European Union right now, I mean, Chirac and Schroeder compared to them were like Metternich and Napoleon, literally, you know. I mean,
Absolutely.
not only did they have a sort of sense of history, and they actually had the cojones to stand up to Washington, especially as it relates to Iraq, but I mean, they understood that you can't really speak of Europe without speaking of Russia, right? You know, bringing back that old dream of let's have one huge Euro-Atlantic Russian security sphere from Vladivostok all the way to Vancouver, which was articulated fairly nicely by Gorbachev, whatever we can, you know, say about him and all the negative commentary that we can have about uh, the last leader of the USSR. But I mean, they had a profound understanding that Europe isolating itself from Russia is just stupid. But right now, it seems we have an elite in Europe that's more, they're more Democratic Party-ish than the Democratic Party in the United States in their craziness.
Scary.
Yeah. But it's for everyone out there to see. I mean, it's on display right now in London, so all you have to do is tune in.
Well, the Norwegians have decided that they will no longer fuel American naval ships. The Virginia already got turned away. So there's
Yeah, I saw that. I think it was a private company that told them to that we're not going to service you anymore. But I think the Norwegian government, they issued a statement. I think it was from this morning that we're going to continue servicing those American submarines, notwithstanding what the company says. So I think they changed that around. Well, they know that they can't really screw with Trump, especially at this time,
yeah.
because we've only seen the opening salvo of what happened on Monday. I think we're going to see Trump doubling down after Sunday, especially after the things that happened today in London. And the fact that, you know, Zelensky clearly said he's not going to apologize for what he did on Friday. And we know that Donald Trump doesn't take lightly to those kinds of insults. So I'm just, you know, the popcorn is lying and waiting.
Well, Donald Trump, first of all, has enough of an axe to grind with Zelensky just from Russian Gate and from the second impeachment when he had a talk with Zelensky and Zelensky tossed everything over to the Democrats. So they tried to impeach him a second time, just from that alone. Never mind that Zelensky also campaigned against Trump, like a lot
Yeah,
of the Europeans did, actually.
and we can't forget, I mean, 2015, there was a Democratic Ukrainian operative. The English pronunciation is Alexandra Chalupa, but we Slavs would say Alexandra Haupa, which
Hmm.
basically means village house, which is an
Yeah.
appropriate term for her. But there were articles in the mainstream
Yeah.
media, in the Financial Times. There was a pretty big expose back in 2017. It was actually entitled How the Ukrainians Tried to Stop Donald Trump. And it featured an expose about how the Ukrainian government under Poroshenko, how certain operatives connected with the DNC, including Alexandra Haupa and the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, were working clearly to sabotage Trump. I mean, the entire Paul Manafort issue came straight out of the
Yeah.
Ukrainians. You know, they wanted to pin the whole issue that he was a Russian agent just because he was working for the Party of Regions. So that's something that we can't forget because it's fairly fresh in our memories. I remember it clearly, even from 2016, 2017, the reporting. And there's actually a whistleblower. He's been around in a few dissident media platforms in recent years. His name is Andrei Telizhenko. He used to work for the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, and he's fairly adamant and open and sincere in how the diplomatic resources of Ukraine were being used to sabotage Donald Trump. So not only Vindman was obviously clearly an unwitting or witting Ukrainian spy within the national security architecture of the White House, but the Ukrainians were very, very well, you know, because when we talk about Russiagate, we usually mention, you know, GCHQ, Brennan, FBI,
Hmm.
Crossfire Hurricane. But I think the Ukrainian issue in all of this is also a very important component that we can't forget. I mean, in Canada, for example, the Ukrainian lobby is so powerful you don't have to conduct such sabotage operations. But in the United States, one lobby, we know which one is clearly the master. So you have to
Yeah.
conduct, you know, sort of regime change operations from your point of view to get things moving in your direction. So I hope Kash Patel gets to the paper soon because he's very aware of what went on in 2015, 2016. And, you know, there are people today who are still around in Kiev who are part of that operation. And Zelensky clearly made, you know, a part two of that with that conversation. And I'm pretty sure that Vindman was in some way used directly, obviously in a clandestine manner, by the then Ukrainian government.
Well, the Russian element in the Steele dossier has been disappeared for his own safety, of course. Skripal,
Yeah.
and his daughter, who happens to be a Russian citizen and is missing without any evidence of her even being alive. Well, I think that's called kidnapping by the British government, if I recall correctly. So yeah, they were. Well, her father was apparently one of the sources for the Steele dossier. So
Hmm.
Steele worked with because Steele used to be his handler when
Yeah.
Scrupule was a double agent. So, I mean, this is it's got deep roots in different directions that implicates a lot of different politicians, European politicians.
That's why I was happy in that exchange, or rather in that smackdown with Zelensky in the Oval, where actually Trump made a short reference to Russiagate, where basically he sort of said that, me and Putin, we had to go through the same crap. So we kind of understand each other better. So they talked for an hour and a half, that first telephone call. I'm pretty sure they didn't talk about, golfing in Mar-a-Lago or, slaying wild bears in Russia's, deep east. I think it was a pretty substantive discussion. And notice that there were practically no leaks out of that discussion, which just goes to show you how tight knit this time the personnel in the White House is, in opposition to what we saw during Trump's
Yeah,
first meeting with Putin in Finland. I mean, we had leaks right after that. I think even one of the translators made anonymous leaks to the media. What was talked about that apparently Trump capitulated to Putin, and so on and so forth. So this time around, we only got that Truth Social post by the president. We got a readout from the Kremlin. They basically aligned, and
which is
I'm
rare,
happy to see
which is
that
very rare.
yeah, that things are moving forward. And I'm actually surprised because you know I had high hopes for Trump too, but I was expecting that he'd start slower than he's actually starting. But the
Hmm.
way things are moving, plus finally, we're hearing initiatives. I think it's going to be 8% a year that Elon is supposed to go into the Pentagon and start cutting things. I mean, if you consider the fact that they haven't passed the last, what, four audits, it'd be nice to
Um,
see some results. And we know that in the post-Reagan conservative movement in the United States, the military is sacrosanct, right? You always talk about we're building up our military. So for Trump to finally go against the grain and build a new narrative within the American, I wouldn't even call it the conservative movement right now. I would call it the nationalist American movement, that we're cutting the crap, we're cutting the bloated bureaucracy. And yes, in the Defense Department, is a good thing because that comes as a shocker to many a neocon.
I'm going to correct you a little bit. They haven't passed any of their six audits. As a matter of
There you
fact,
go.
everybody remembers 9/11, right?
Yeah,
Um, Nobody remembers it was 9/10 or the 10th of September. The 10th of September was when Donald Rumsfeld came on television and admitted that the Pentagon failed its first audit ever and couldn't account for 2 trillion. This was back in
yeah,
2001. $2 trillion worth of property over that entire period. But true, it wasn't just out of 1 year or something like that. But for $2 trillion. And then 9/11 happens and everyone forgets about it.
yeah. Well, just like everyone forgets about, I mean, on the campaign trail in 2000, George Bush talking about doing, implementing a humble foreign policy. I remember that debate with
Yeah.
Gore where he said, we can't go around the world telling people how to live, right? So
We
I'm
just
obviously
bombed them.
not. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not a proponent of, 9/11 was a conspiracy and the government is behind it, but the fact is, weak, weak-spined men changed radically with the times. And I remember, just to give you an example, and your listeners, when the whole COVID hysteria was ending, which in fact was ended by Vladimir Putin, you should get
Yes,
Nobel
he
Peace
was.
Prize for that. But that timetable, just after January 2022 and somewhere by the end of February 2022, the start of the SMO, a lot of friends that I had, good Catholic, conservative, patriotic, pro-family, they all understood what was happening with COVID, that it's basically a BS narrative and the pharmaceuticals just want to get rich in a nutshell. But then Ukraine comes along and 90% of these people buy the media narrative. And it's just like that meme that Elon put on today on X, I think, or yesterday, that, we lied to you about COVID, but our coverage about Ukraine is 100% true. And I was shocked, I mean, why are you guys believing this? And I came down to a conclusion that it's a deep psychological factor, unfortunately, still in Poland, that because in this issue, Russia was on the other side of the barricade, then what the media says about Russia has to be true because we can't expect anything good from Russia. So on this, we are aligned. Now, obviously, after 3 years, things have changed, but still, there is that latent, thinking that the evil empire is still in the east. He wants to come and get us and eat us. So
That which, by the way, it has always amazed me with my conservative friends. Well, half of them are longer friends because of this war. They decided they didn't want to talk to me anymore. But in the U.S., they wouldn't believe anything the media told them local news. Oh, it's
yeah,
lies, blah, blah. And it was lies. But the moment the news comes from abroad, over the
mhm.
big lake, one lake or the other. Oh, it's God's honest truth. Like, why would the people lying to you about what's going on inside your country suddenly start telling you the truth about what's going on in other countries?
It's
Total
funny because I
disconnect.
think a lot of people should be opening up their eyes because if you find out now that USAID was sponsoring BBC and Reuters and stuff, it's like, whoa, it's your local propaganda machine on a grander scale. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
USAID was literally funding Western media, which I can't, have suspicions that they lack funds for their operations, and they were still giving them money to push the BS. So what Doji did in that regard and the dismantling of USAID, and from what I heard, they're going after NED also. That's great. That's fantastic. And from what I know, also Darren J. Beatty, who was President Trump's, he's one of his first speechwriters in the first administration. He got dumped after a while because the media came after him that supposedly he took part in a white supremacist research conference, which was nothing of the sort, of course, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
He had to resign. Then he set up Revolver News, and now Beatty, he actually spent a lot of time in Revolver News reporting on the January 6th hoax, but also talking about how Washington's regime change operations were being turned around to do regime change operations inside the United States, basically abolish Trump after his first administration and fake the elections. But he's back now in the State Department. I think he took over as, I forgot the policy position,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of good people going into the State Department right now. And I don't think we're going to see, well, I'm hoping that we really, if anything new comes back, then it'll come back in a new form. But the deep state that we've known thus far with its modus operandi of classical regime change operations in the world, with that whole apparatus, that is being taken apart piece by piece in a very quick manner. It's basically a blitzkrieg from what I'm seeing, which is very, very good.
You know, in my view, when I watched that whole 47 minutes, starting with it's a little bit longer if you start from where Zelensky arrives.
Yeah.
It's just the first time Trump pokes fun at his dress. That it's no longer even the Green Goblin; it's the Gopnik.
Yeah.
The, you know, for those who don't know what a Gopnik is, it's your neighborhood thug, low class alky thug, druggie sitting there in a sports costume. It's an Eastern European thing, I guess.
Yes. You had to be there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All he was lacking was the three stripes on his pants.
Right, right. Uh,
Made in Kazakhstan, baby. Made in Kazakhstan.
well, it's either that or it's an
Yeah.
upscale Viet Cong
Yeah,
pajama
yeah, yeah.
suit. But from that moment, if you actually look, never mind the Polish or the Ukrainian or the CNN journalists, but you look at the other American journalists, the questions that are getting taken, if I was a conspiracy minded person, I would say they were very well staged because he starts with some kind of control. He starts his little rat tactics. Oh, look at the pictures. Look at the blah, 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 all this. And that doesn't work. Then he
Yeah.
starts trying to badmouth Putin, and Trump's staying neutral, and that doesn't work. He's starting to lose cool and control. And then the questions are coming, at least the ones that Trump's picking, and they slam him again on his suit. Do you even
Yeah.
own a suit? That was, and he's losing it. You can tell that whatever coke he's on or whatever he's on, I guess it's losing its edge, and he's starting to lose it. And then Vance comes in. That's like the final blow on that,
Yeah.
and the mouth just starts running, and the brain, I guess, whatever stimulus it has, just starts shutting down. I mean, for Trump, the agreement that they had on the table at that point was just a frame agreement, not what Trump wanted. It was just a
Yeah.
meaningless frame agreement. So he wasn't getting what he wanted, but now he's gotten his hands fully untied.
It looks that way. I mean, I'm tending also to the view that it was staged, obviously on the American side. They
Right,
set him
right.
up basically. He really thought this wasn't a game of 3D chess, Zelensky, because at the end of the day, there would be some sort of American security presence, whatever you want to call it, if they were to come in with the minerals, because you might not have the United States Army there, but you'd have contractors. You might have Eric Prince coming back in. Who knows? But I really think Trump just in his heart of hearts, and Vance said this 3 years ago when he was on Bannon's war room when he was still senator. He said literally almost, he didn't use the word, but he said, I don't give a shit what happens in Ukraine. I really don't. It's not our problem. And I think in my heart of hearts, Trump thinks exactly the same way. And the fact that he's he's a New York real estate dealer, you do things the rough way in New York. And he roughed up Zelensky pretty good. And I don't think Zelensky understood what he was being asked to do or what he was being set up to do, but he played it well. And right now, I think I had a thought yesterday that as of yesterday, at least, Trump has NATO and at least the European component of NATO and the European Union exactly where he wants them to be. Because right now, if you're seeing articles in the Financial Times, as we did, what was it, yesterday or the day before, with the title, "The United States is now the enemy of the West," that I think is a consensus, literally, that's the title.
Yeah,
That I
I
think
saw
is a
that.
consensus. And we know that the Financial Times is basically Anglo-Saxon neoliberal elites spouting their BS to the world. So that tells you something that they believe, they have two hillbillies running the United States, and we got to do something about this. Plus, let's not forget that Chrystia Freeland, that Banderite loving post, well, in her heart of hearts, still Ukrainian, possibly future prime minister of the 51st state, I'm sorry, Canada.
I think there's like 53 or 54 states, or four states you can add on to that out of Canada. It's a big place.
Yes. She made a statement a few days back that she was calling on apparently the Scandinavian countries and Great Britain and France and our Asian democratic allies, as she said, but she put the emphasis on the European component, that she didn't say it in so many words, but she used the word nuclear. We should ally basically with the nuclear states against the United States. And I'm pretty sure Trump is hearing all of this. I mean, this is not, being ignored. And I think if they think they're coming strong at him right now, I think just wait and see what's going to happen this week. I mean, last week he openly said the European Union was created to screw the United States. Now we can debate that because we know that the sources of the European Union were actually in Washington, at least in the early 50s. It was supposed to be a sort of American extension in Europe. But at the end of the day, with the Maastricht Treaty and the way it evolved, it has definitely become a parasite on the American, economy and body politic in a way. Plus, they want to bring you into World War III. So at this point, they can be easily considered an enemy of the United States. So, I mean, if they're wedged between the United States and Russia, and the only thing they have left is the song lyrics of Liverpool Football Club, "You Will Never Walk Alone," to Zelensky. That tells you something, because I don't know if I think your viewers noticed, and you too, that the scripted message after Zelensky got his ass kicked and booted out of the White House was, "You're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone."
Oh, yeah. I saw that. No
It's as if
originality,
everybody
by the way, just copy and paste all of them.
Literally, I thought everybody was just became, Liverpool Football Club fans. I'm not a fan of Liverpool. I'm more into Manchester City, but still, I mean, everybody's singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." What the hell's going on, right? So it's scripted, just like scripted, they always say the same thing. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I mean, geez, have you ever seen a full-scale invasion or unprovoked, full-scale and unprovoked? And they repeat it to this day.
Yeah.
It's really amazing what you can do with clicking, copy paste, copy paste. So yeah, I'm waiting what's going to happen in the next couple of days coming from Washington, because the Europeans are just giving Trump more and more excuses to not only screw them economically, but I think, as James Stavridis said today on CNN, the former NATO head of U.S. forces in Europe and former Supreme Allied Commander, that we might be seeing the last days of NATO. So I say amen to that.
Well, considering Trump just dropped 25% tariffs on the EU uh, across the board, that's not being taken. Actually, they're not even talking that much about it. They're so paranoid with what happened with Zelensky. But here's a question, strictly to Poland in general. First, is Poland looking at the western portion of Ukraine, the parts that were part of Poland prior to World War II? And B, even if it's not, okay, so the war ends, Ukraine gets demilitarized, but you have several hundred thousand to half a million men out of work with some amount of combat experience, and the criminal organizations are going to flourish. What is Poland going to do? Because it's going to bleed right over into the Polish border. I mean, that's obvious enough. What?
It's already bleeding. Police officers on Polish television are saying things that they weren't allowed to say 2, 3 years ago. That we're seeing a huge rise in crime in Poland due to the presence of Ukrainian and Georgian gangs that are going wild in Poland. We're basically having a return of the 1990s, when cars were being stolen en masse in Poland, and they ended up, either in Germany or in Kyrgyzstan, for example, or in Chechnya. That culture is coming back. I think it was Pat Buchanan who once said, "You import the third world, you become the third world,"
Oh,
and that's what
absolutely.
we're seeing right now.
Absolutely.
The crisis that is the Ukrainization of Poland through the mass migration of Ukrainians to Poland, and as an addition, members of certain other nations from Central Asia or the Caucasus, due to our stupid open borders policy, has already destabilized us seriously, socially, our labor market. I mean, this is a whole different topic that we can talk on literally for hours. But getting back to your question, if right now I don't see anybody seriously in Poland contemplating the absorption of Western Ukraine, and I would be totally against it, because if we did, we would basically have, Kosovo times 10 in Poland. We'd have mayhem. Because it's nice to be sentimental. Oh, we'll take back our ancient territory. We'll take back Lviv, Volyn, and so on. Yeah, sure. But in order to Polonize and integrate that back into Poland, you'd have to either liquidate or deport or do something with the several 100,000 armed to the teeth Ukrainian nationalists who, have wet dreams about Stepan Bandera and are no friends of Poland. So I think I can't even begin to contemplate what will happen once the war ends, and if anybody in Poland decides to be, on an idea, for example, of Western Ukraine at least becoming some sort of open border protectorate of Poland, if not a de facto part of Poland. That'll only generate problems.
Hell, Lvov was ours even before it was Polish, and we don't want it back anymore.
Yeah,
That's just a problem nobody wants to deal with.
Just to give you an example, one of our presidential candidates, Sławomir Mencen, he made a short recording. I think it was on TikTok a week ago. He went to Lviv and he made a recording in front of Stepan Bandera's monument, and he said, "We don't accept this. We call on Ukraine to stop the cult of Bandera, and I, as president, will do everything I can to make sure that nothing of this sort happens in Poland, and we're going to be eradicating Banderism from Poland." So the next day, the mayor of Lviv basically called him a Russian stooge. And the day after that, he appeared on the Mirotovorets enemies list very quickly.
Well, I'm on there too.
So
it's a
he's
big list.
basically, and I'm not a fan of Menson, by the way, but the guy's got a target on his back right now. And it just goes to show you, and this is just, the opening salvo of what can happen, because A lot of the things that are happening on the border aren't being talked about in Poland officially, but I think the amount of weapons, the amount of people, the amount of drugs that are going east to west and either stop in Poland or are going further west is huge.
Oh,
And
I'm
it'll
sure.
only get bigger once the war ends and we have literally, like the Bakara market on our
Yeah,
southwest
yeah,
border. And what's
absolutely.
interesting, President Duda actually acknowledged this in a sort of half-assed way, but at least he had the guts to say it after 3 years, that once the war ends, we're going to have a similar problem to what happened after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when unemployed soldiers, former KGB officers hang around with the mob, gun running, mafia, all that kind of stuff. And we should expect the same in Poland. And it's funny because, we could have stopped
Win-win.
right at the very beginning. But we said, no, we have to let in the refugees. Well, the refugees are driving BMWs, Mercedes, they're crashing on Polish highways, killing people. Literally, as I said, we can spend hours and I could talk to you about how we're becoming a third world because of our open border policy with Ukraine and by extension with some naughty nations of the Caucasus, because we also have, unfortunately, a big contingent of Chechens who aren't fans of Ramzan Kadyrov and President Putin also
Wait.
operating.
Chechnya is not a separate nation. It's part of
Yeah,
ours,
yeah.
but we don't want
It,
those people back either.
so yeah,
Or our liberals, for that matter.
we're taking them all in, unfortunately. I'll also give you this example. A few weeks back, there's a Ukrainian activist in Poland. Her name is, I think, Diane Panchenko. She was on a Ukrainian TV interview, and she said, in light of the upcoming Polish presidential elections, which will take place in May, she basically sent out a warning to the candidate. She said, and oh, by the way, if you try to instigate anti-Ukrainian sentiment in Poland, beware. You can see shops being burned down. You can see riots. It was basically an open threat.
Wow.
When
Wow.
Polish television actually captured that, they had to translate it from Ukrainian because she wouldn't say that in Poland. But she said that living in Poland. And you know what happened? The next day or two, after that video was uploaded and they had the translations, she finally got an official Polish citizenship from the Polish president. Instead of being deported like that by our internal security service, she's now a proud Polish citizen. By the way, she's the same activist who doused Russian ambassador Andreev with red paint 3 years ago as
I
he was
remember
trying
that.
to honor the Soviet soldiers in that big monument in Warsaw. It's the same lady.
So all of you semi-legals in Poland, you just heard the formula to getting instant citizenship: start threatening pogroms against the majority population, the root population, and I guess you get a free passport as a exit gift.
Literally, literally. I don't
Insane.
know.
That's
And the
insane.
fact that the silence from the president's office is pretty crazy. It's funny because the former Polish Prime Minister Leszek Miller, he actually talked about this on a pretty popular television program. He actually mentioned her. They showed the video, and there was no response from the presidential office. They didn't revoke her citizenship. It was just out there. I mean, she literally was threatening presidential candidates with, "Hey, you try to say anything anti-Ukrainian, you're going to pay for it." So,
What about Brown? He member. I can't remember his first name. I'm sorry. Uh,
Grzegorz,
huh?
Gregory.
Gregor. Yeah, the member of parliament for Euro Parliament. You said he was going to be running for president also.
He's
How?
running. He's gathering signatures. It looks like he's going to gather the needed amount, and yeah, he's campaigning currently. I've actually seen him last Sunday. We were at mass at the same church in
Oh,
Kalisz.
tell him hi
Yes,
for me next time you see him. I'm a
will do.
fan.
Will do. He's hard to say what his poll numbers are right now because I think it's too early, and a lot of people are, as one Polish politician said, I don't believe poll numbers that I myself haven't paid for. So,
Well put. Very, very well put. And very honest.
so I'm guessing it's somewhere right now within the 3 to 5% area. Might be growing, but whereas Brown for the last couple of years was sort of associated with the anti-war, the anti-Ukrainization message as the biggest radical in this regard, he's become somewhat muted in the last couple of days. I don't think it's because he stopped believing in that. I think it's just because he's talking about other issues. But Menson has come out And he said he made that video in Lviv, with which I think was a PR stroke of genius, where he
Yeah.
said, Banderism has to end, and we can't subsidize this. And the way they came after him, it's only working to his advantage, because at least the poll numbers in Poland, and there's a research group at the University of Warsaw which annually does research on the opinion of Poles about Ukrainians living in Poland. And ever since March 2022, we're seeing a decline. So if you were to ask them in March 2022, the consensus was, I think 72% were positive that we should accept the Ukrainian refugees and so on. Right now, it stands, I think, if I remember correctly, at just around 55, 54%. So you've seen a significant drop. And even the people I talk to, I mean, it's sort of a politically incorrect topic, because nobody wants to be labeled, racist and so on. But you hear the murmurings, I mean,
Oh yeah.
my kids are in a class full of Ukrainians. This is not natural. My kid can't get into kindergarten because they have preferences for kids of Ukrainian refugees. So it's there. It's there. The only thing is, we need somebody to sort of, take that spark and light a fire. And Brown was doing that. Menson has somewhat touched upon the issue. Of course, for the liberals, you can't talk about Ukrainians in any negative way. And it's funny, because if
The
we're to
new
believe
chosen
the
people.
news, I mean, and let's be frank, everybody does spy operations. Apparently, from what the Internal Security Service has told us, which is the Polish equivalent of the FBI, the people that were accused of spying on the American hub in Rzeszów that's transporting in Yashonka, the Yashonka airport that's transporting equipment to Ukraine, the guys who were apparently spying for Russia had Ukrainian citizenship. So not only are you importing the third world, but you're also importing, potential spies from what you call your enemies. So, that doesn't make sense either. But whatever, Polish politics doesn't make sense, especially our immigration policy. As a matter of fact, we don't have any immigration policies. Basically, open border, open border, open border. But yeah, it is what it is. And unfortunately, I think the wheels are still turning a little bit too slow. But thanks to people like Diane Panchenko and her statements, they feel that they can openly speak because they're not getting any pushback. But there is pushback, it's just not organized. And believe me, people in my village, in my township, the majority of them have had it up to here with,
Sure.
with not hearing Polish on the street anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I understand. Well, then you get the same thing. You look at what happened in Romania, which is a
Yeah,
powder keg that's just on the edge of
yeah,
exploding. And then you get what was his name? Barrett, the former member of the EU Parliament, bragging, "We did it in Romania, and we'll do it in Germany if we have
yeah,
to."
yeah,
We're going to control your democracy
yeah,
to protect our democracy. So
yeah.
you think the same thing may happen in Poland?
If let me put it this way, if by some miracle Grzegorz Brown, for example, was tied with one of the other candidates to go into the second round, there would probably be an EU military intervention in Poland. I think you'd see something akin to what happened to Erdogan in 2016. There literally probably would be a coup. That would be such a shakeup. I mean, if it happened in Romania, why not in Poland? And obviously, they'd find a literal excuse that either he's a pedophile or that they found some rubles in his apartment. The same old, same old.
Somewhere he saw
But
a picture of the Kremlin once in his life.
yeah,
That's
and,
it.
and I mean, Tusk actually said, 2 days ago in Parliament, that the reason why he's in power is to stop people like Brown and Mensen from coming anywhere near power in Poland. So he said it openly. But I'm pretty sure there's a significant part of the metropolitan liberal elite in Poland that could be mobilized to at least make it look like there's huge, huge pushback against such a candidate as Brown. But I'm pretty sure our international curators in Brussels would not let this go through. So yeah, by all means, we could see a Romanian scenario or a Georgian scenario, as they tried to do on the streets of Warsaw. By all means.
I mean, it's incredible. At this point, it's conspiracy theories. No, I think replacement theory is far from being any kind of conspiracy theory. Because if you look across the board, and we've got the same element, liberal element. It's gotten a lot smaller. It wasn't that huge to begin with, but it was still from the 90s in the government. to some degree, and still some of it is still in place. And they had policies. I mean, the UN literally had a document out, immigration plan for Russia. This came out in 2000. The immigration plan for Russia 2030, where they were proposing 200 million new people in Russia. And I'm
Mhm.
sure they had an immigration plan for everyone else in European and Christian countries. And these obviously aren't going to be Poles and Romanians and Germans coming into Russia
Yeah.
for 200 million. It's going to be from other parts of the world, and it's on track, as far as I can tell, for the vast majority of Europe. And
You
it's
know,
just pouring and pouring.
the trick that was played on the Polish mind was when you had the Syrians and the North Africans coming across Hungary to Germany in 2015, where Merkel was welcoming them. When Poles saw that, they still had a sense of their inner identity of, I would say, white, Christian, and Slavic.
There we go. Okay.
So going back to your question about the immigration policy, the trick that was played on the Polish mind, I think around 2015, 2016, when we saw that huge wave of migrants or pseudo migrants coming from Syria, North Africa, through Hungary, making their way to Germany, was the fact that when the when Polish public opinion saw that, and we still had ISIS around. There was talk of mass terrorism potential. You had the attacks in France, the Bataclan, and so on. Excuse me. So you still had that association that terrorism or Islam equals terrorism, and we didn't want anybody who's basically not white coming into Poland, which is a sort of natural defense mechanism. But the trick that was played on us was, hey, but we can have massive immigration in Poland. Let's just import Ukrainians because they're white, they're Christian, they're culturally aligned with us, which was a genius trick because on the surface, yeah, sure, Poles, Ukrainians, both Slavs, both generally Christians, fairly similar language. History, let's not talk about history.
Yeah.
That's why would we want to talk
Had
about
some
that?
good times, had some bad times.
Exactly. Forget about it. But no, no. See, in Poland, we can only talk about history as it relates to Russia, but nobody else. But anyways, and the trick was played, and there was this propaganda campaign. I remember it's sort of died down right now because people are seeing the effects that the Ukrainians are in essence Poles just speaking a different language. We're so closely aligned culturally, which if you look at it even from a sociological standpoint, and if you do the research, is total crap because the Ukrainians, in Poland we say generally people from the East are Ruski, Rusek, Ruski, i tak dalej. But if you boil it down to the proper definition, Ruski is actually Ruthenian, not Russian. So if we think of Ruthenia as being today's Ukraine, then saying Ruski are actually saying Ukrainian in the modern sense, not Russian, because Rosyjski is Russian and Polish, not Ruski. But anyways, it is what it is.
Even though
But
Ruski is the Russian word for Russian.
yeah, exactly. But if you want to differentiate in Poland, if you want to be more precise, you'd say Ruski as sort of the entire Russian sphere, but Rosyjski as Russian per se, or subject of the Russian Federation. But anyways, going back to your question, a lot of people bought that and they said, well, if we bring in 1 million Ukrainians, that's fine because they're not Muslim. But apparently, it turns out that apart from terrorism, you could also have a hell of a lot of other problems like just common crime, corruption, destabilizing the labor market, and the fact that at the end of the day, you are going to get similar Ukrainian immigrant ghettos, just like you're getting with the Africans in France or with the Somalis in Sweden. I was obviously, I understood the dynamics from the very beginning. And I remember even back then when I was calling for an immigration moratorium, a lot of people were laughing at me, but what the hell? They're not Muslims. They're not going to hurt anybody. They're just, Ukrainians looking for a job. They're just going to pick apples here and so on. Well, nobody's sane is talking that kind of language anymore, even from the top echelons of the Polish government. But that was a masterful trick, and it worked because a lot of the capitalists, the greedy capitalists, who like to bring in cheap labor and don't want to pay Polish workers higher wages, they loved it because they had a bonanza literally. Because not only could they pay the illegal Ukrainian migrants a lesser wage, but there's also a huge pool of illegal Ukrainians coming into Poland or overstaying their visas. As a matter of fact, if you look at the people who are transporting all the Afghans and Africans and all the other mostly Southeast Asian people who are jumping the border between Poland and Belarus, I would say about 80% of the couriers who are transporting these guys into Poland and Germany also are Ukrainian. Surprise, surprise. So
Right.
they know what to do in Poland. They're, like fish in a fairly well-regulated fish tank, so to say. And yeah, we're seeing the effects all over the place. And I was always of the opinion that out of all the post-Soviet nations that unfortunately had trouble finding their identity and still had a lot of the negative aspects of the time of the breakup when we had disillusionment and desperation and so on. It wasn't the Russians, it wasn't people from Central Asia, it was actually the Ukrainians. I
Yep.
mean, the Belarusians, they got their crap fairly together, but the Ukrainians, I mean, they were all over the place with this, right? I mean, if you heard news about, even the movie, what's it called? Some of Our Fears
Mhm.
was based on the fact that Ukrainian nuclear material was coming out of Ukraine and going to the West of the terrorists, not from Russia itself. And, we found out later that, I mean, black market was full of people from Ukraine, scientists who would say, we'll sell to the highest bidder.
Yep.
So it was basically the wild, wild east. And unfortunately, we've imported a lot of that wild, wild east into our own borders.
Yeah, that's a big difference. I mean, okay, particularly Eastern Ukraine was never Ukrainian. Kiev
Yeah,
and East was always Russian. It was Ukrainized by the communists when they created this Ukrainian state. But that population, the Maloroshan population, that's and it comes with a very different work ethic, and it comes with the ethic. You'll understand this. Maya chata skraya.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Mhm.
My hut is at the edge, which means the whole
Yeah,
village can burn and go to hell as long as it doesn't get to my edge. I don't care,
yeah,
and I'm not gonna help anybody, and that's the mentality. That really is the mentality. Russia went through the '90s and it got its ass up out of that muck and it started going forward. And I'd visit relatives in Eastern Ukraine, Central Ukraine. I thankfully don't have any relatives in Western Ukraine and you tell them this is how life is. No, no, it can't be. Okay, you got it better than us, a little bit better. But you're basically they oh, even in the 2000s, the late
mhm,
2000s, beginning of 2010s, they psychologically could not accept that they stayed in that muck in the 90s. Everybody else went on. Bye
yeah,
bye. Been nice. Smells like shit. We're gonna go take a shower and we're gonna move forward. And they
mhm,
just like pigs in shit. They settled in there and they got comfortable in there and they stayed in there. And
yeah.
and there you go. Now it's just they stayed in there with combat experience and no jobs, even less jobs than before.
Yeah, it's a tale of mass suicide, which apparently they share with the current European elites
Oh,
in a way.
jeez.
But I am worried because the amount of the multi-vector aspect of the danger that could be coming from what happens. I mean, obviously, so in a way, it's like a two-pronged. There's it's two sides of the coin. So in one way, obviously, we would all welcome the ceasefire or the termination of the war in Ukraine, obviously. But we understand that the other side of the coin is there's going to be another huge flow of Ukrainians into Poland. I mean, they're not going to be going into Slovakia. I don't think they have any love for Robert Fico.
Yeah.
They're
He
not
has
going to
no
be
love
going
for
into
them,
Belarus.
especially after 5 bullets.
They're not going to be going into piss poor Moldova, and they're certainly not going to be going to Russia. So where can they go? They're going to go to Poland. Now, the question is, will they remain in Poland or will they continue to go west? I hear rumblings every so often that some Ukrainians are putting TikTok videos in Poland. Poland is a crappy country. They treat us like crap. We're all going to Germany now. And apparently there has been, some of
Yeah.
them actually, saying bye-bye to Poland, going to Germany. Some have even left for Canada, the ones that were actually here, or the States. But the majority, they're still here. And a significant number of them, from what I've seen, about 40% say that even if the war ends, despite the fact that they will remain Ukrainian and They don't plan to assimilate. They plan to stay in Poland. Because if we had a small contingent of, engineers, mechanics, hardworking people, said, look, all we're asking for is, we'll speak Ukrainian at home. We'll keep our traditions. We'll go to Tzedekef on Sunday. You guys go to church, but we'll become loyal Polish citizens with no BS. I have no problem with that. But you're not going to assimilate 3-4 million Ukrainians. That just ain't going to happen. Especially if your entire edifice of statehood based on late stage liberalism is you're not allowed to assimilate. You can only do multiculti. Assimilation means fascism and Nazism. You can't make anybody Polish or Russian or whatever, or American. There's no such thing as assimilation. So the melting pot won't work in Poland, and the elites and the think tanks are aligned at making Poland basically, at least if not multicultural, then a binational entity. And this is going at a fast pace.
It's not working in Belgium, for God's sakes. Look at the size of Belgium. And the Frisians want out and have always wanted out. And they're both Catholic. They're both basically the same ethnicity and a lot closer even than I would say Poles and Ukrainians. And they can't live together on the same roof.
If I look at it and sometimes I think, because we talk about this cultural alignment with the Ukrainians, I think as Poles, we are most closely aligned, by far with not Ukrainians, not even Belarusians, for sure not the Czechs. We and the Czechs, we love each other.
Who doesn't love the Czechs?
They invaded us, and we invaded them. Well, we
Mish, you froze up there.
But with Ukrainians, I mean, it's just insanity. It won't work. It never worked. I mean, it was already tried twice. The First Republic fell apart because of the entire Cossack problem. Well, not strictly because of it, but it certainly contributed. Khmelnytsky's uprising and so on. And then in the Second Republic, the fact that we had so many what was then called Ruthenians, and the fact that Banderism was allowed to expand. I mean, we had a Polish minister assassinated by Banderites. That's why Bandera was put in jail in the Second Republic. I mean, we had a huge problem. And I'm not saying that the policies regarding the ethnic Ruthenians by the Polish government were, fine and dandy, because they weren't. They're pretty stupid too. I mean, we had a whole campaign where Orthodox churches were being burned left and right in Eastern Poland. Dumb as hell. I mean, you provoke people that way. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show that if you guys have your country, we have our country, it works much better. We don't need nobody. The funny thing is, a lot of so-called conservatives who are for a mono-ethnic state as clearly as possible, or as strongly as possible, hate communist Poland, despite the fact that it was because of communist Poland we became a mono-ethnic entity, which was a good thing for the first time in our history. We had solid borders, and the vast majority of people living in Poland were ethnic Poles. For the first time in our history, we can say, wow, we can now ensure, 1,000 years of peace, because we don't have the Tatars, the Russians, the Ruthenians, the Belarusians, the Czechs, the Hungarians. We have everybody living in Poland. We are just Polish right now. And that worked fine for 40 years. But unfortunately, because you belong to a globalist entity, they had to start screwing with us at the end of the day, too. They couldn't let that go.
Oh, of course not.
So yeah, as you said, the process is the same all over the place, especially in the post-communist countries.
And the post-communist countries, I think, were just catching up, because the process started in the Western countries around the 1950s, 1960s, directly post World War II, within 15 years. There was, if you look at the,
funny in this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you look at in the West in general, if you look in the UK, the mass migration started about in the mid 1960s, and France the same thing with Algerians and other Northern Africans, and so on and so on. Italy, it just gotten a lot worse down the road, but it started relatively early. Turks
It's funny
being
because
brought in.
When you had the 65 immigration bill, when LBJ was in power, and its most strongest supporter was Senator Edward Kennedy, and he made a speech actually on the floor of the Senate where he said that we shouldn't worry about this immigration bill, which basically for the first time opened up the borders of the United States to everybody but Europe. Said that this bill will not in any way undermine the European ethnic majority composition of the United States. Right. So even at that time, that was total crap, of course, but even at that time, they felt the need to sort of defend themselves by saying, yes, we understand we have an ethnic majority, and that's not in any way going to be undermined. But right now, they're not even talking about that, because to even talk about an ethnic majority, I mean, it's like Justin Trudeau in My Country of Old, who said, there's no such thing as Canadian culture. We are the first post-national entity in the world, which, you know, if you talk to any third or fourth generation Canadian or, you know, Quebecois or person from Upper Canada or Manitoba and say, really, there's no such thing as Canadian culture. You actually said that. But yeah, they don't feel the need anymore to defend what's still left of an ethnic majority that is being screwed in their own country. So just goes to show how far, you know, the Overton window has moved.
Well, look at Sweden. It was about 15 years ago. The Swedes said, you know, the Somalis that, because they've been at this for 20 years, and when the first problems started appearing about 5 years after, so the Somalis that they were bringing in mass, they have the same right to this land as the root nationality. Okay, let's go to Somalia and ask the Somalis if we can have the same right to their land as the Somalis. I'm sure they'll get the exact same answer. Sure. Just bring a lot of guns.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, if I remember correctly, there was an amendment in the Russian Constitution where it speaks of the core of the Russian nation. About a few years back. I remember Martynov discussed that in one of his books.
That doesn't actually exist. That's one of a really sore point, because you got to remember the original Russian Constitution has been modified. I think it still needs to. It still has issues that need to get modified. But the original Russian Constitution was written by the State Department, or with the assistance of the State Department. So the same thing, the State Department.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to write anything that was going to help any nation that came under the umbrella of the State Department, regardless of who the nationality was.
Yeah.
So obviously it's going to be made to be as weak as possible, to promote corruption when possible, and to destabilize, because that's anything the State Department touches. That's how they work. So that's still an actual issue, a sore point, because people identify themselves as Russian. So I'm not saying 100% Russian, or I don't know if you can even find 100% Russian, because we've intermixed quite a bit. God knows I've got like 8 different ethnic groups in me, including German and Polish. So
Das ist gut, bardzo dobrze.
Meine Großvater war ein Dritter Reich Deutschlander und dann ein Polish Deutschlander.
Nicht schießen, nicht schießen.
And he finished as a major in the Red Army. So yeah,
that's Central Europe, Central and Eastern Europe for you. That's the beauty. That's real multiculturalism. That's the kind of multiculturalism I support.
That was an old Jewish guy was interviewed like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, who's talking about that, you know, he's changed countries like 5 times and he never left his village. The borders in a very short time just jump back and forth.
And they ask those kind of people, who are you? I'm Tutesha. I'm Meistov. I'm from here.
What's the flag flying today? I do not understand. Okay, that I become that now. Whatever. And we speak our own language anyway, so who cares?
Yeah. But so there was no amendment to the Constitution, right? There is no talk of a Russian core, or were there propositions about that?
Oh, there's propositions, and that's something that I think needs to change.
Okay.
Because people identify themselves as Russians are 82, 83% of the population. And we do have a migration problem too. It comes to same businesses that buy local authorities that then get citizenship or bring in quotas, in this case from Central Asia. And it's the same crap I heard in the U.S. about when they started flooding in Mexicans and Central Asians and all. Oh, it's jobs that Americans won't do, like pick fruit.
Yeah.
Like, interesting thing, American poor people were picking fruit up to the 1960s,
Yeah.
1970s, and all of a sudden they wouldn't do that anymore. What changed? Well, it didn't change that they weren't willing to do the job. It's just they changed. I can pay an illegal a hell of a lot less money. And, if he complains, I'll just get him kicked out. And it's
The
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 same
American
concept.
the American won't do this job argument is akin to the war in Ukraine was unprovoked argument. I mean, it's
Oh,
been
yeah.
abolished so many times by intelligent economists such as Michael
Yep.
Lind. He wrote a great book recently. It's called geez, the tragedy of low wages. But Michael Lind has been doing great research on this, and he's a former neocon, by the way. But yeah,
Oh,
it's the paradigm is the same. I agree. Yeah, we need
and
cheap labor,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. It's the same thing in Russia. The Russians won't do that kind of labor. And, with construction was the same thing. Oh, Russians won't do construction. It's beneath them. That's why we have to get all these migrants in. Well, it comes along COVID, and all the migrants can't work. A lot of them, a very large percentage of them left, got kicked
Yeah.
out, or couldn't come back in when they had left before that to renew their visas. And the price level for the labor starts going up and hits about 80,000 rubles. And all of a sudden, you
Surprise,
get a
surprise.
flood of new
Yeah.
workers, and they're all
Yeah.
Russians or
Hmm.
nationalities of Russia. Because you
Hmm.
have the old, by the way, the old Russian word for Russian is Rusich.
Hmm.
The more modern is Ruski. And
Hmm.
Россиян is a 1990s word. I hate that word. It's just
Hmm.
Russian as this, like, in general. Because you have
Okay.
Russian and then you have Russian people. The
Hmm.
Russian people is everybody else living in Russia who's not Russian,
Okay.
ethnically Russian. But ethnic Russians are 82% of the population. So, and it's not written in as the core nationality, which
Hmm.
pisses a lot of people off. That's one of those issues that still needs to be addressed. Hoping it will
What
be
are the
addressed.
I know you're doing the interview, but I just have to ask you this question
No, no,
because
go ahead, go ahead.
you're in Russia. But I remember there was a lot of talk after the Crocus terrorist attack that there have been mass deportations that are going to take a look, especially at the guys coming in from Tajikistan. Have you felt or seen any reforms on this front? Are they cutting back on what's coming in from those countries?
Yeah, with the Tajiks, there were a lot of cutbacks. A lot of them couldn't get in. I had a Tajik that was working for me, everything legally. I paid him the same thing I paid Russian workers. He was an assistant manager. No, I had a pizzeria. One of the other guy was a Russian guy. He couldn't get back in. He had a lot of problems getting back in. He finally got him back in. That was that there was a lot of problems with that. What really hit and was the family capital, the money that was being paid for having kids.
Yeah.
That said, unless the parents were Russian citizens, it's now denied.
Hmm.
And a lot of them self-deported because all this
Okay.
extra money, all the extra stuff they were getting, well, because they weren't they were bringing their families in first of all
Hmm.
illegally.
Yeah.
Second of all, so right off the bat, what right have they got to any of the money if they're
Hmm.
already in country illegally? Or to an education or anything else. If they're not paying, if they're not legally in the country, their kids have no right to be in any schools, just to begin with.
Hmm.
So a lot of them, once the money got cut, they self-deported because they weren't there to become Russianized. They weren't there to become loyal citizens. They're there for the cash. What
Hmm.
can you give me now? What can you do for me? And it works. Once you cut that umbilical cord, they don't want to be there anymore. It's not interesting.
Okay.
But a bigger issue that's still for us, Tajikistan started fighting Islamicism. So
Hmm.
this is a Muslim country fighting Islamicism. They forbid the big beards. They forbid the face covering for the women and head to toe covering.
Yeah.
And all the ultra religious people, they ran to Russia.
Hmm.
So the question from
Okay.
the society becomes, why aren't we forbidding this? If
Hmm.
they're, the people that don't want to conform to normal society in Tajikistan are running to us. Do we need that? No, we don't need that. We're importing another problem, another headache.
Hmm.
And another thing that came up with this, with the SVO, with the war, came the fact that when you get Russian citizenship, unless you're 50 years or uh, under over 50 years old. If you've never served in the Russian army, you have to register with the registration office for
Okay.
call up, if anything. If you serve with the Russian army, it all depends on what rank you had, how long you stayed registered. If you're an officer, you can stay registered up to 60 or
Okay.
65, depending on your rank as an officer. So anyway, so all these guys, of course, didn't bother registering, and nobody went after them until the SVO started, and then they started hunting them down and going, "Okay, you're going to the front because you didn't register. We're automatically going to register you as
Yeah.
punishment." And these guys, there were mass deportations
Mm.
when they came up with, "Yeah, you're not buying your way out of this one."
Hmm.
So a lot of them suddenly decided, "No, we don't want to be citizens of Russia." Okay, fine, go away then, because if you move to a country you're not willing to defend it,
Of course.
then maybe you don't need to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why we don't want our
Um,
liberals back.
yeah. I mean, I
Sorry if they're in
remember.
Poland, but we don't want them back.
Yeah, there's some freakish Russian liberals are in Poland. I remember they had a sort of funny conference just after the start of the war. I think it was somewhere near Warsaw where they were organizing and calling for, abolishment of Putin and all that crap. But I mean, we, I remember once, what was his name? Hmm, the Chechen terror,
Yeah,
Dudayev.
yeah, the
I
dive.
mean, I think we still have a Dudayev Square in Warsaw because Poland in the 90s was in solidarity with the Chechen people, of course, no matter the amount of atrocities and so on. So we were sort of like the earlier version of Mrs. Kaya Kallas, who said that the great thing we can do to Russia, I mean, we can divide it in so many small nations. And by the way, my husband is doing a lot of good business with the Russians, but they soured on him. But it's like you want to ask them when she's spouting her Annalena Baerbock type, intelligence sit reps. How many divisions does Kaya Kallas have? It's reminiscent of what Stalin once asked about how many divisions does the Pope have? So, but yeah, no, it's interesting to see that perspective because, as I said, I mean, the image that we get of Russia and Poland is so highly distorted that I mean, the majority of Poles have never been to Russia. I mean, anybody who went after the collapse of, communism and after the Berlin Wall, like a few of my friends, they went there to either work or for the World Cup or out of genuine, tourist interest to get drunk on the Trans-Siberian train, which is good too. I'd love to do that someday.
That's
But
a lot of
the
drinking because
images
that's a
of,
long train,
it's like,
right?
yeah, I thought the Canadian from Vancouver to Toronto was long, but geez, forget about it. I'd love to take that. And third class, obviously, because that's where the real people gather on a train in third class. But I've seen videos of it, and I hope it's something I do one day. Actually, my friend was coming back from Kaliningrad today. I asked him if he was in Baltisk. He says no because well, at the beginning of the war, you could sort of come near the base and look at the nice ships of the Baltic fleet standing there. But apparently, right now there's a contingent of FSB guys in the bushes, and if you come a little bit too close, they'll say, "Come on over here." And if they see a Polish license plate, it's definitely get your ass over here. What are you doing here? Just tourist photos.
There's
So
photos of every weapon system on there.
yeah, but the good thing is, and I think this is to your credit because the movement of people through the border between Poland and Kaliningrad has only increased, and the Russians are not making any problems. Poles are still sitting on the beaches in Kaliningrad. They're having fun. They're eating the caviar. They're drinking the champagne, and it's good. It's good that at least we still have that small little opening over there
Yeah.
that people can actually see what's happening in Kaliningrad, and the fact that the economic progress has been fairly good from what my friend told me. And he spent the last, 5 years in Moscow. He was working as a semi-diplomat in Moscow for an international bank. So we got to know the country fairly well. And it's good to have people like that because it's very hard to push the BS on them that, oh, the Russians, they still use outhouses. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? And the fundamental question,
But,
have you ever
but,
been
but
to
wait a minute,
Russia?
wait a minute. That's why we really, this whole war started. We were looking for toilets and washing
And
machines and a
yes,
few
get a
dishwashers.
Samsung. You got to get a Samsung. That's my
Yeah.
washing machine. I'm pretty damn happy because the Samsung actually sings. But maybe because I'm a Russian agent, It's oh, am I hearing the Russian anthem from my laundromat?
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
that?
That would be genius if you get into their manufacturing facility,
Or you can
hard
imagine
code that
you're
into the control chips.
it ends the washing cycle, and all of a sudden you hear from the washing machine, Yaruski.
That would be just genius right there.
Something to think about. Something to think. I mean, you've stolen so many chips for your
Ah,
washing machines. Who knows, you know?
hey, that's our secret. That's our secret. We put the missiles on wash cycle. On rinse is when they're coming in, and that's terminal velocity, baby. Rinse
Nice.
cycle. That's it.
That
Can't
must be
stop
some clean
rinse.
missile. Beautiful.
And the worst part is, I think she actually believed that when she said that.
Oh yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah. I mean, just like people today are, even despite the fact that even the economic indicators coming from such hefty institutions as the World Bank are saying, oh yeah, there's no economic crash in Russia. People are still saying, yeah, we've managed to turn the ruble into ruble. You know, it's whatever. You
Yeah.
you had to be there, so to say. I mean, that's the only thing I always tell people. You know, I haven't been to Russia yet. I plan to go. I know a lot of people who have been,
Come
and
over. We'll burn some meat on the grill.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Even in Lent, despite the fact that I'm cutting back on meat, I'm still allowed to eat some meat. So
Yeah, I'm bad at keeping fast fully, so I will be cutting back quite a bit. But
the temptations are all over the place. But I think that's a general message to anybody watching in the West. You know, your program that just go, not even just Russia. You want to get to know people, get to know places, go there. It
absolutely,
really opens the eyes once you touch and feel and talk to the people. Always.
that always killed me.
And
The
then you'll see
modern,
that, yeah, go on, go on.
I was gonna say that always killed me. The modern Western experts on nations that have never been to those nations.
Yeah, or they've spent, 5 minutes in the Capitol talking to people like themselves. And that's their
Right, right.
experience pretty much. So,
Yeah, because the capital always represents the entire nation, like New York City represents America, or
that's it.
Washington, D.C.
That's the thing. And one of the things that my friend actually really hammered into my head, he said, don't ever think of Moscow as being representative of Russia. I mean, you have no idea the complexity and the diversity of that huge
Oh yeah.
country. Moscow is like, this is Moscow, you know?
I tell you, well, I live outside of Moscow, but you go to the smaller cities, they're much calmer than Moscow. Moscow
Yeah,
is that hyperactive, everything takes, it just eats your time, eats your years, because it's just a megapolis, right?
yeah,
You go to the smaller cities, they're more friendly, family oriented, they're quieter, calmer, life goes at absolute different speed. And I caught myself, me and one of my right-hand guys, we were on a business trip up north, Usinsk, I think, or one of the other towns. We had a oil gas facility up there. And we're in a restaurant, and I'm sitting there. Frick, it's been like 40 minutes. They haven't brought our food yet. What the bloody hell? Oh, it's like 30 minutes. I was like, what the bloody hell? It's like, Stas, calm down. Look around. Everybody's relaxed. They're here to spend time. And I was like, and I already got caught up in the Moscow, that rat in a
yeah,
wheel. Everything fast,
yeah,
fast, 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 fast.
yeah, yeah,
Like, damn, you're right. They're enjoying their meals. I'm not just throwing food down, running to the next thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
wow, these people are living. We're just,
But obviously, I would like to see Moscow. I mean, it's just I would never want to sort of evaluate any country just on the experience in their capital city. As a matter of fact, if I were to visit any country, I think the smart thing would be to do is not go to the capital first, see the countryside, and then end your trip with the capital. That I think would be the proper progression of an experience in a foreign country. So that's what at least I try to do in any way that I can. So.
yeah, definitely, definitely visit any country. Well, obviously, I wouldn't say any country because that's how a couple of people got their heads chopped off when they said,
Yeah.
"Hey, let's go to, North Africa or Afghanistan," because it's any country, just like us. Well, there
Unless
are
you're in
limits.
Vatican City, where you're in the country and the capital at the same time, you got to see more than the capital city.
Right, right, absolutely, absolutely. And depending on the country, they're so varied, the different areas too. So But yeah, it's absolutely.
Indeed.
Um, and hey,
It does take a lot of humility to evaluate a country, especially a country of such diversity as Russia. And humility is something that, you know, so-called geopolitical experts
yeah,
Hello?
my internet's up and down the
Okay.
last couple minutes. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left on the timer. I'll say the World Cup was genius because it was like 11 cities. So
Yeah.
people couldn't say, oh, it's just Moscow or St. Petersburg. And people traveled around. And that was
Yes.
just, yeah, if 11 cities look like this, what do you think the rest of them look like? And that
That's
was just
it.
a genius move, PR.
I remember when my friend, the one that I mentioned earlier, he went to the polls, I think were playing in St. Petersburg, and he said it was funny because there were more Russians wearing Robert Lewandowski shirts than Poles at the match. So, but we have very, even in football, there's so much in common between Poland because the Russian coach, Cherchesov, he used to be the coach of Legia Warszawa, and he did wonders with that team. So when he was coaching the Russian national team at the World Cup, we recognized him fairly quickly because he was associated with our main, basically,
Hmm.
football club, Legia Warsaw. And Cherchesov has a lot of sentiment from Poland too. So I mean, there's so many ways of building bridges. I mean, culinary, alcoholic for those alcoholics out there, and football. I mean, football
Yeah,
is
oh yeah.
so much there, you know.
Unfortunately, some people build bridges in for football by beating the crap out of each other. You get the hooligans, but I guess it's also
That, that
bonding. That's
that's
the
when you
way.
combine the alcoholic aspect with the football aspect. Don't necessarily always have to do that, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah, never quite understood the whole point of that. Just going out. I mean, if you just want to fight, you fight. Why do you have to ruin a football match for somebody? But
Yeah, I was as an expat, I was always used to seeing, a big NHL fan. I was always used to seeing the hockey players beating the crap out of each other, but the fans just, maybe throwing a beer or two on the ice.
yeah,
But when I came back to Europe, it was like, hey, the fans are beating the crap out of each other, and the players are just doing their thing. It's completely turned around. It was like, wow, cultural shock.
yeah, yeah. It's uh, that's the only
By the
problem is
way, by the way, congratulations on Ovechkin getting his another hat trick out there. I think it was one of his Jesus 30th, I think, hat trick. So keep on kicking ass. I'm pretty sure he's going to see President Trump in the White House if the Capitals go all the way to the Stanley Cup, and I think that'll be part of the rapprochement between East and West, hopefully. So
yeah, when I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, I'm sorry, not Charlotte, Raleigh, North Carolina, they had a pretty good hockey team, and they played with the Canadians a lot.
mhm.
And then I moved to North Carolina, to Texas. One time I went to see the Houston Rockets
Houston
against
Rockets.
somebody's Monsters. That was the
Okay.
name of the teams. That was the worst hockey match I've ever seen in my. I'm surprised they knew how to stay on the skates. It was just
Well,
horrible. You watch about
Texas
half and
and
like,
hockey. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
You don't
Well, it's
usually
North
think of
Carolina in
that.
hockey. But yeah, that was one of those. Oh, guess I won't be watching hockey anymore live while I'm living here.
That's America for you.
Yeah, but you never know. You never know. Well, we're running out of time. We've got less than a minute. Misha, thanks for joining. To all the viewers, thank you for joining. Look for Mikhail Krupa's other interviews and his works. It's worth listening to. Um,
I'm
he's
going to be on Redacted tomorrow live at 4 p.m. Eastern with Clayton Morris, if anybody wants
tell
to
him
tune
hi
in.
for me. Maybe he'll invite me one day.
Will do. No, I think he'd be open to Russian sources for sure. So I'll mention you definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I got on the door, and so you could show that. So thank you for joining. It was a pleasure as always. I'm waiting for you to come here.
Okay. I'm taking
So
you at your word, and